Hey, welcome back to Bible 365 with me, your host, Kathy Carter. I am reading through the Bible in 365 days. I'm using the 1-year chronological Bible reading plan. You can find it online at oneyearbibleonline.com, and then you just scroll down, find the chronological reading plan, because they have a whole bunch. Find the chronological one, print that up, and read along with me. Today, we are on day 128. And we are reading through the Psalms. And so today is May 7th. So on your calendar, you're looking at May 7th. The reading is Psalms 12 through 17 and 19 through 21. It is the book of Psalms, which is plural for psalm, which is a poem, song, hymn, right? That's another name for all of those things. Day 128, which means we've been in it for 127 days before today. King David wrote most of these Psalms. If you've never been with me before, I'm going to give you a little description of who King David is, but this is what I encourage. I strongly encourage you to like this, to hit the share button, so share it with other people, and subscribe to the channel. That way you can actually have all of the videos in my channel, and so you can start to put together who King David is. I'm going to give you a little taste of it, but really there's a lot more to David than just what we're going to hear here. So go back and watch some of those videos and read along, of course. I'm always encouraging everyone. I really want you to read first. So King David is king over Israel. Up until what we've read at this point, he's actually died at this time, but this is what he wrote while he was alive, obviously. And so he wrote poems, he wrote encouragements, he wrote songs, he wrote directions, right? Instructions for how to live. And so they package these in a book. And what they would do is a lot of times they would sing them. So they would go to services and they would sing these songs from David. And so they would be reminded all the time in song of the things that David said to them, the things that David did, some of the things that David remembered, some, right? So that's some of the purposes of Psalms was to remind people. I'm sure if anyone is a music head, and that's probably most of us, I feel like most of us like some kind of music, you know that you remember a song from 30 years ago, and there's a lot of other things. Like you might not, I'm in a school, and I'm helping to work for a school, and I had to do math, and I had to do the volume of a cylinder, and I did not remember that from 30 years ago. However, if I go back to music from 30 years ago, which is the 90s at this point, it's not even the 80s, but I remember them, I can remember lyrics from those songs. So I may not have understood what they meant, but I can remember those lyrics like that. Like you hear the tune and those lyrics just pop up in your mind. So a lot of these things were helping people to remember it. There's also joy in music. So let's get real that we like to listen to music. It brings us joy and happiness. And so how much better to sing about God and about what God has done and about who God is and about how God has been with us and how we can be closer to God. So there are all these things that David says in these Psalms. So in saying all those things, I want to go back and discuss what these Psalms are. So we're going to start here. It's going to be Psalms for days and days and days. So I hope you find joy in Psalms as much as I do. All right, so Psalm 12 is the one that we start with. And again, these are written by David, who has had a lifetime of being with the Lord. Don't know necessarily when these are. These could be when he was running from his son, when he was running from Saul, when he was finding joy, when he was just having a bad day, so it could be any time during his reign as king, or even before his reign as king. He was writing them when Saul was king, and he was still sort of running for his life. So, all right, so he starts out this psalm with, "Help, Lord, for no one is faithful anymore." And it looks like he is upset with the people around him. And I don't think he's talking about people that don't know God. I think he's actually talking about his people, his kingdom of Israel. And I think he's sad and upset that they're not following the Lord in the way they're supposed to. Those who are loyal have vanished from the human race. Everyone lies to their neighbor. They flatter with their lips, but harbor deception in their hearts. And I have to tell you that, like, I feel a lot of this as well. Like I feel we are teaching people to speak nicer, to people around us, but our hearts are still really, really wicked. So in a lot of ways, we hide a lot of what we really think. We joke, my husband and I, like, I would rather be with somebody who's honest up front, even if they have hateful honesty. At least I would know where they stand and I would know where I stand with them, rather than somebody lying right to my face and having like wickedness in their heart, and knowing they hate everything I am and everything that I stand for. And instead they just kind of talk about me behind my back, but in front of my face, they're really nice to me. I'd rather be with somebody a little bit more genuine. And so, I feel like there is a lot of this. And so I can feel some of his pain in even recognizing that people who say that they love the Lord have a lot of this stirring in their hearts, right? Like they really don't like their neighbors, but they're nice to them on the outside, but on the inside they harbor a lot of like animosity and anger towards them. They flatter them, but they don't. They harbor deception in their hearts. So he's asking the Lord to silence all of this. He says, every boastful tongue and those who say, by our tongue, what does it say? By our tongues we will prevail. By our own lips will defend us. Who is Lord over us? So they're getting to this point where, and again, I'm going to say, I feel it around us. They're getting to a point, people around us are getting to a point where we say the Lord on our lips, but the reality is we really think we do it all by ourselves. We think that we have created financial abundance. We have created a world where there's no war currently in our country at the time. We have, right? Like we have done all of these things. And so really, who needs the Lord? Because the truth is that I've done it all on my own. He's great and he loves me and he's for me. But the reality is I have built myself up on my own. And so I live in a way in my heart that I don't necessarily need him. Now he follows this up in verse 5 that it says, the poor are plundered and the needy groan, and I will arise, said the Lord. And the Lord is going to come up because he hears that there is brokenness still in the world, right? And they're needy and they're calling out to him, and he's going to come up. He's going to protect them, the Lord, from those who malign them. And the words of the Lord are flawless, like silver purified. So his words are perfect, even better than silver, better than gold. So you find that finest thing, and the Lord's words are better than that. And it says, Lord, keep the needy safe. Sorry, you, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked, who freely strut about when what is vile is honored by the human race. It's just a picture of humanity, what it looks like to be surrounded by people who either take the Lord in vain or who just don't love the Lord at all. So moving on to Psalm 13. This is David being a little bit devastated. So again, another Psalm of David. And David we can go right here in this first verse. And he says, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? I don't know if you guys have ever felt like this. And what I want to note is that David seems to have such a close relationship with the Lord that when the Lord is not answering him, he notices it. And he's like, how long are you going to stay away from me? Because he can feel it. He can sense that God isn't with him at this time. He's crying out to him and he's not listening. How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? Being away from the Lord is devastating. It's heartbreaking. That's where fear comes in. That's where worry brings up. That's anxiety, right? That's depression. That's anger. That's hostility. Even mild forms of frustration. This is all being away from the Lord, because the Lord is all the good things. He's light. He's love. He's glory, right? He's all those really good things. And when we can't hear from him for whatever reason, we feel like either we are far away from him or he is far away from us. That's when all of those other things start to pile in. So we need to turn to him in order to be away from those things. But David is essentially saying he doesn't hear from him. And he follows up and he I don't know if he says, look to me, right? So he's asking him, he's seeking him, and he's saying, answer me. But he follows up in the very end in verse 5. He says, but I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation, and I will sing the Lord's praises, because he has been good to me. So he remembers that the Lord, even though he's not here right now and he can't feel him right now for whatever reason, the Lord has been good to him, and so he will honor him anyway. So this is sort of like when you're at some of your worst and lowest points and you feel like God just isn't there and you can't feel that connection to him. These are one of those ones that you want to come to. All right, moving on to 14. So this one I had to read a few times. And I'm telling you that because this is one of those ones that's quoted a lot. And so I don't want to go forward because it does go forward, but I don't want to go forward. I always want to go backwards and not forward. So I really want to stick in either the present or the past. And this is David speaking these words. And so I want to share with you what I actually believe that David is saying, because he starts out by saying the fool says in his heart there is no God. So if there's a foolishness, I don't want to say you're a fool if you don't believe in God, because that sounds awful, but we become foolish when we don't have belief that there's a God, right? So when we don't think that something outside of ourselves exists and helps us and is there for us and created the world, right? That's foolish. You can either say you are a fool or they are fools or whatever it might be, but the action is foolish because there's so much abounding evidence that that's not true. So it's just a foolish notion. I'm not saying stupid, because I know some brilliant people don't believe that there's a God, but it's foolish. It's not wise. So there's a difference between smart and dumb and wisdom and foolishness, right? So there's differences there. Someone can be extremely brilliant and still be foolish in a lot of the things that they do and the things they believe. And so he said, so I just want to start out with that notion that the fool says in their heart, there is no God. They are corrupt and their deeds are vile. So the fool is corrupt and the fool's deeds are vile because they do not believe that there is a God, and therefore they do not respond to God's decrees, right? They don't answer him. They don't believe that his decrees are true because they don't believe that he exists. So it's whatever's in their own heart is what they think is right. And then it says that the Lord, so this is kind of like this little section. The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand. So who is the fool and who is the one that the Lord looks down on, right? And it says, all have turned away, the fools. All have become corrupt, the fools. There is no one who does good, the fools, not even one. So if you are a fool because you don't believe that there is God, right? You believe there is no God. You don't understand. You don't seek after him. You turn away. You have become corrupt and you don't do good. So because the goodness comes from the Lord. And so it comes from the understanding of the Lord and the understanding of the way that the world works and the understanding of our nature as humans, right? So, and then it says, do all these evildoers know nothing? They devour my people. So David's people, the Israelites, they devour my people. They never call on the Lord because they don't believe he exists. But there they are, overwhelmed with dread, the fool. For God is present in the company of the righteous. So he's there. He's there for the righteous. He's there for those who seek him. He's there for those who believe that he exists and know what he has done. And then in verse 7, it says, oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion. When the Lord restores his people, the ones that aren't foolish, let Jacob rejoice and Israel be glad. And so I just think that we have to recognize it's a call to seek after God. It really is. It's a call, and he's reminding his people to seek after God, right? To continue to seek after God. This is what I think. I think he's reminding his people to seek after God, and he's stating the foolishness of those that don't seek after God. So if you see a lot of these behaviors, trying to devour other people, and knowing that they don't believe in God, and it's because they turn away. So the corruption has come from the fact that they turn away. And so even to note that if we see those who say they seek God, but there's a lot of corruption in there, there's a good possibility that they don't seek God, right? That they're the fool. So be aware of that, right? In our own hearts. All right, Psalm 15. Moving on. starting out again, another Psalm of David. Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? So I like that this is following up the one in front of it, because he's specifying some differences between the righteous and the fool, right? So the righteous is the one who seeks after God. The fool obviously is the one who turns away from God. And so it says, so who's going to dwell in your sacred tent? Is so being very literal in sacred tent. Sacred tent is where God lives, right? So this is probably before he even started talking about Solomon building the temple, because God was in a tent. He was, the Ark of the Covenant was in this tent among the people. It was in Exodus as well. And so he's like, who can be with you? If you remember, we did a lot of that talk about the Levites being the bridge between them to dwell in the sacred tent. So who can be there, and then who can live on your holy mountain? And very often they call where God was the high places. So where you worship God is the high places. Up on a mountain, Moses met him up on a mountain. Joshua met God up on a mountain, right? So literally high places in the world, up on mountains, is where we find God. Who can be there? By the way, we know people were there. We know that Moses was there. We know that Joshua was there. We know that, right? That we know that because Joshua was up there with Moses at some times. So we know that they went up on a mountain to meet with God, and we know that people did that. So who are the people that can do this? The ones who walk, the one whose walk is blameless. Now I know you're going to say to me, nobody's walk is blameless. Let's keep going. The one whose walk was blameless, who does what is righteous. Who does what is righteous? How can one do what is righteous? We got a list right here. So these are great things to follow. If you go, who can be someone who follows God? This is what they do. They speak the truth from their heart. Their tongue offers no slander. They do no wrong to a neighbor. They cast no slur on others. They despise a vile person. They honor those who fear the Lord. So you're going to honor somebody else who fears the Lord. You're going to lift these people up. And I think that we tear each other down as believers of Christ all the time, because they don't believe the same exact things at the same exact time. And I think we're supposed to be honoring people who we recognize love the Lord. They keep an oath even when it hurts. So if we go back and look at some of these oaths that were made, that's extremely important to the Lord. Beware when you make an oath. They don't change their mind. They lend money to the poor without interest, and they don't accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken. This is how you are blameless. This is how you are righteous. You do unto the Lord. You do these things. And this is not an outward, like if I just give away all my money, it's not just an outward thing. It is an internal in the heart. They honor those who fear the Lord. You can't do that if this is not something that's coming from your heart. You keep an oath. You don't do wrong to a neighbor. I know I've just listed all of them, but just thinking about those things, like you can't, in your own power, you can't keep from doing wrong to people. You just can't do that in your own power. We have to give all of that over to the Lord, right? And when you do those things, in God's eyes, you are considered righteous and blameless. And those are the people who are going to dwell in the sacred tent and who are going to be on the holy mountain with the Lord. I think that's a really important one to remember. So if you can try and memorize that. I don't memorize anything. I'm terrible with memorization. But if you can memorize it, if you're one who memorizes, or if you have a goal to memorize, I think that's a great one to memorize, to remember who God is, who you are, and how you can be with God. All right, Psalm 16, moving on. This is a miktam of David, and I wanted to note what that means. So again, I remember I mentioned that there were Psalms and there were some other things, and we're going to see some other things later on. But this is a miktam, and miktam means it's a poem. And so a psalm is a song. It's a hymn. Very, very similar. This is a poem. So maybe it was sung, maybe it wasn't sung, but it was definitely something that was written for the people. And David, and I just even think sometimes, like some of these, he seems to be crying out to the Lord. He's crying out to himself. He's talking to himself. He's alone. This one is a little bit different. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. Couldn't spit that one out. Keep me safe, my God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. Apart from you, I have no good thing. And so he just says all of these wonderful things about the Lord. He's also talking about his Lord's people. So verse 3, I say of the holy people who are in the land, they're the noble ones, in whom is all my delight. So he's delighting in the Lord's people. He's delighting in the Lord. And then in verse 9, therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest secure, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, nor will you let your faithful ones see decay. Just a note on this. David dies before we even see these. So his body is going to decay. So curious about the meaning of what that might mean. Does God not honor what David is saying? And I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that he's not going to abandon him to the realm of the dead, which maybe is their Sheol, maybe is their Sheol, maybe is their hell, their version of hell, the dead, because he's going to actually live eternally with the Lord. So if we say, you won't let your faithful one see decay, quite literally, his body is going to see decay, but his spirit, his soul will be with the Lord eternally. So it seems the Israelites did believe there was eternal place with the Lord that they were going to be in. I'm not exactly 100% sure what that looks like, but it seems like there are some similarities when we find out in the future. There are some similarities. They do believe in eternity with the Lord. I don't want to say eternal life, but eternity with the Lord. You will make known to me the path of life and fill me with joy in your presence. All right, moving on to Psalm 17. This is a prayer of David. So now he's praying. So this is, again, slightly different than a psalm. He's crying out to the Lord, hear me, Lord. My plea is just listen to my cry and hear me. So right away, he's just reaching up to the Lord and asking him to listen. Something is happening. And he says in verse 2, let my vindication come from you. May your eyes see what is right. So he's seeking God to recognize what's going on and to see if there's blame in him or if there's blame in the other, whatever the other party might be, and then to get his vindication on what is right, right? Like, so the Lord can see what is right, who is following the Lord, and then David's asking for vindication from that. He said, if you check in me, hopefully you're going to find nothing bad there. My steps have held onto your paths. My feet haven't stumbled. And then I call on you, my God. And then it says in verse 7, show me the wonders of your great love. You who save by your right hand, those who take refuge in you from their foes. So he's saying, show me this, because I'm taking my refuge in you. I'm not taking it out on my right. I'm not handling the business. I'm taking all of this and I'm leaving it in your hands. Keep me as the apple of your eye. So keep him in his keep him special, right? Because David is keeping all of these statutes and all of these decrees of the Lord. And then in verse 13 it says, rise up, Lord, confront them, whoever's opposing him. Bring him down with your sword. Rescue me from the wicked. By your hand, save me from such people, Lord. So he's crying out to the Lord to take care of all this. Even if it's by David's hand, it's the Lord who's going to take care of all these things, right? He just wants to hear from the Lord what he's supposed to do. By your hand, save me from such people, Lord, from those of this world whose reward is in this life. May what you have stored up for the wicked fill their bellies. May their children gorge themselves in it, and may there be leftovers for their little ones. He's talking about people who, I'm going to just go on to the next verse, because in verse 15 it says, as for me, I will be vindicated and will see your face. When I awake, I will be satisfied with your likeness. He's talking about people who, and I'm going to use this phrase that we use it all the time, YOLO. Like, he's talking about people who don't have this promise of eternity, of being with the Lord forever, so following his decrees and being with him forever. He's talking about people who live in their best life now, right? Like the ones who think you got to get everything from every moment in this world. This is what's most important. This very itty bitty teeny tiny time we have on this little speck of earth at this time. That's what you have to make the most out of. And David's like, save me from those people. Those people are trying to get it all right now. I'm recognizing I have eternity with you. And so just vindicate me when you can, so I can spend eternity with you. I'm going to follow what you tell me to follow. I'm going to listen to you so I can be with you for eternity. And even in just saying this, he says, I will be vindicated and I will see your face. So when he dies, he says he will be with the Lord. When I awake, I will be satisfied with seeing your likeness. And so he's looking for the greater picture, the longer term, where others are looking for the short term. Moving on to 19. This is a Psalm of David. So this is a song, a hymn, something that they would have sung. And he's talking about the heavens that declare the glory of the Lord. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. The world knows who God is. And I don't just mean people. I mean the world. I mean everything. Everything in this world acknowledges that there's a God. And he's saying not necessarily with a voice, right? We can't hear rocks speak, can't hear grass, can't hear animals, can't hear any, but with everything that they do, they acknowledge the Lord and the way that he exists. It says, because verse 4, it says, yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. So everything acknowledges God. Moving down to verse 9, it says, the fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees, the things that God says, the decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. Everything God tells us is righteous. Understanding it is different. So I want to be clear that, like, picking out a verse, like just randomly opening your Bible and trying to pick out a verse, that's extremely difficult. The chance that you're going to get the decree wrong is pretty high. So when you open up and it says, don't mix linens, I always use the easiest one. Don't mix linens, right? And we go, what? We're not supposed to be mixing linens. God's decree is righteous. That's what we're all supposed to be doing. We need to be careful when we do that kind of thing. What we want to do is we want to understand, and why I'm doing this, we want to understand the entire picture of what the Lord's decrees are. And you can only understand that by getting in and digging into his word to help him and asking him, right? If you seek him, he's going to honor that, and he's going to listen to you, because all of what he decrees is righteous. We need to understand, because we unfortunately are not righteous unless we are following his decrees. And that needs to be a greater understanding for us. They're precious. And then going into verse, I'm going to go to 11 first. Sorry, I'm going to go to, 10. I'm going to go to 11. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can discern their own errors? This is what I was saying. We can't always tell, right? We need other people to tell us. Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant, so he's asking the Lord, keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgressions. Great transgressions, because unfortunately we do make mistakes, because we can't always tell. We don't always know. And so we have to ask the Lord to be able to show that to us, so we can ask for forgiveness for those things. And then he finishes up in verse 14 with, may these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight. Moving on to Psalm 20. This is another psalm. May the Lord answer you when you are in distress. May the name of God of Jacob protect you. Talking to his people, reaching out. He's essentially praying over them. And he's praying all of this. May the Lord do all of this for you. And then in verse 6, he says, now this I know, the Lord gives victory to his anointed. He answers him from his heavenly sanctuary with the victorious power of his right hand. Some trust in other things like chariots and horses. That's not us now. We trust in other things like our job, our family, our friends, right? We trust in other things. Some of us, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They are brought to their knees, those who trust in chariots and horses. They are brought to their knees and fall, but we, those of us who trust in the Lord, rise up and stand firm. Lord, give us victory. Answer us when we call. And here's the last one. Another psalm. The king rejoices in your strength, Lord. How great is his joy in the victories you give. David is praising the Lord as the king. He's listing, I'm not going to read a whole bunch of this to you, but he's just listing all the things that God has done for him as king. He's given him victories, and two sides. He's recognizing that God gave all these things to him, and he's thankful that God gave all these things to him, right? So he recognizes that God has given him great victories and glory over enemies, right? But remembering that it is from God, it is not through the power of David that these victories have been given. And then he's going to finish up in 13, and he says, be exalted in your strength, Lord. So he's lifting God up to everybody who's listening. We will sing and praise your might. That's how we're ending today. I know that's a lot. There's so much stuff in there. And I totally encourage you, if at all possible, to read these Psalms over and over and over again. These are the things that you want to stick with you and to get you through when times are difficult, right? This is kind of a poetical or a musical journey of who God is and then how we can rest in him. And so I just really encourage you to read these. Take time in reading them, because sometimes they can feel repetitive, but they are not. He's just glorifying in the Lord over and over again. I already mentioned it, but if this was a blessing, and I hope that it was, I want you to like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and keep reading. I'll see you guys tomorrow.